The city woke up early that morning. Cars honked on the busy streets. Office doors opened. Shops raised their shutters. And inside a tall, glass building in the heart of the city, the bank of Gramps Henderson stood tall. A place of money. A place of power. A place where people came with hope in their eyes, hoping their savings were safe, hoping their businesses would grow, hoping their problems could be solved. But here's the truth. No worker in that bank had ever seen the real owner. They only knew his name, Gramps Henderson. They only heard whispers. He's rich. He's powerful. He built this bank. But to them, he was only a signature on their paychecks. A shadow. A ghost. That morning, Gramps Henderson stood before his mirror. He was an old man now. His silver hair shone like the moonlight. His eyes, sharp but gentle. He wore no expensive suit. No golden watch. Instead, he put on a simple shirt, a pair of old trousers, and a flat cap. He whispered to himself, Today, I will see how my workers treat our customers." He stepped out of his mansion, leaving behind luxury cars, leaving behind servants, leaving behind his title, and walked into his own bank as just another man. The bank lobby was full that morning. Men in suits, women with files, students clutching forms, old men waiting with hope. He moved slowly, leaning on his cane. He walked to the counter where a young accountant sat. "Ma," he said softly, "my account is having issues. Some transactions failed. Can you help me, please?" The accountant looked up for just a second, then looked away. Her fingers tapped quickly on the keyboard. Her face carried no smile. "Go and sit at the waiting area," she said flatly. "We'll attend to you." Gramps Henderson nodded quietly. He walked to the seats. And there, he waited. Minutes dragged like heavy chains. The bright morning slowly bent toward noon, and still, Gramps Henderson sat in the waiting area, forgotten, invisible. The cushioned seats beside him filled and emptied. Students came, argued nervously at the counter, and left with stamped forms. Businessmen stormed in. He sat silently, watching the big brass clock on the wall. Its hands ticked with cruel precision. 1 hour. 2 hours. Each tick felt like a reminder. You do not matter here. The lobby grew quieter. The morning rush thinned. Even the receptionist yawned. Yet no one called his name. No one asked if he had been helped. No one even looked his way. He shifted slightly in his chair, the cane pressed firmly against the floor. The ache in his back worsened, but his face remained calm. His eyes, however, carried storms. At last, with the patience of a man who had given them more than enough time, he rose. Slowly, carefully, every movement measured. He leaned on his cane, shuffled toward the counter again, and stood before the same young accountant. His voice was gentle, steady, almost pleading. "Ma, please, what's wrong with my account? I've been waiting for long." The accountant froze for a second, her lips tightening. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, she leaned back in her chair. The sound of it, loud, sharp, drew a few glances from others in the lobby. Her eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with irritation. "Can't you see I'm busy?" she snapped. "Sit down and wait. We'll get to you when we can." The words lashed out like a whip. They struck not just his ears, but his heart. But Gramps Henderson did not flinch. He did not argue. His eyes, calm yet piercing, remained fixed on her, studying her as a teacher studies a careless student. Then, with a soft nod, he spoke again. "Please, then, may I speak to the manager?" The request hung in the air. The accountant's face twisted with annoyance, as if the very thought of this old man daring to disturb her routine was an insult. She rolled her eyes, muttered something under her breath, and pushed her chair back. The sound of the wheels scraping the tiled floor was harsh, impatient. Without another word to him, she turned sharply and walked toward the glass office at the far end of the hall, the manager's office. The glass door closed behind her with a faint click. And once again, Gramps Henderson was left standing at the counter alone. The eyes of a few customers fell on him, curious. Some pitied him. Others simply shrugged and looked away. But inside, the old man's resolve only grew stronger. So this is how they treat the forgotten ones, he thought. Let us see how deep this sickness runs. Inside the manager's office, the air smelled of expensive cologne and polished wood. The blinds were half drawn, slicing sunlight into thin lines across the glossy desk. Behind it sat the manager. The accountant cleared her throat softly. "Sir," she said, "there's an old man outside. He says his account is having problems. He's been waiting for a while. He chuckled, low, careless, almost amused. An old man, he repeated. Dressed how? Plain clothes. Worn shirt. Flat cap. He looks ordinary. Then tell him to wait, he said flatly. After a pause, he smirked, his voice dripping with cold calculation. Better yet, don't bother me with this. After some hours, he'll get tired and leave. I don't have time for that right now. The accountant hesitated, biting her lip. For a second, humanity flickered in her eyes. But the weight of her boss's authority crushed it. She nodded quickly. Yes, sir. She turned and walked out. When she returned to the waiting area, her face carried a mask of false reassurance. She stopped at Gramps Henderson's seat and smiled faintly. The manager is coming, she lied smoothly. Just wait a little longer. Gramps Henderson looked up at her. His old eyes searched her face. For a moment, it almost seemed as though he could see right through her words, right into her hidden truth. But he simply nodded. Thank you, Ma. And once more, he waited. The clock ticked on. 1 hour slipped by, then another. The lobby grew quiet. The rush of customers had faded. Chairs that had once been filled with restless bodies now sat empty. Even the security guard yawned at his post, glancing at his watch impatiently. But no one came for him. No one spoke his name. No manager appeared. Still, Gramps Henderson sat, silent, patient, watching. Every tick of the clock was a blade, carving deeper into his disappointment, not for himself, but for the institution he had built with his own hands. At last, his cane tapped softly against the floor as he rose. His body moved slowly, heavy not with weakness, but with quiet grief. He turned his eyes one last time toward the counter, toward the office where the manager still sat behind his desk, oblivious, reading his paper. Then he turned to the door. No voice called after him. No staff rushed to stop him. No one cared. The great owner of the bank walked out of his own building unnoticed, his shadow stretching long against the pavement outside. And in his heart, a vow was made. They have failed the test, but they will not know until the day I reveal who I am. But in those long hours of waiting, one man had noticed him, a young worker in a neat but modest suit. He had been watching the old man, watching him sit, watching him wait, watching him fade into the background. Finally, he walked up and knelt beside him. Sir, he said softly, I've seen you here for hours. Why are you waiting? What's wrong? Gramps Henderson explained his failed transactions. The young worker frowned with concern. That's not right, sir. Let me help you. He took Gramps Henderson's details, tried speaking to the accountant, tried speaking to the manager, even walked from office to office. Though they brushed him aside, he did not stop trying. He returned to Gramps Henderson again and again, apologizing for the delay. And though nothing was solved that day, Gramps Henderson felt something rare. Kindness, compassion, humanity. The next week, a meeting was called at the bank. Every worker gathered. Whispers filled the hall. What's happening? Why are we here? Is something wrong? The doors opened, and in walked Gramps Henderson himself. Gasps filled the air. Mouths fell open. The manager froze, sweat running down his face. The accountant turned pale. Gramps Henderson took off his cap, revealing his silver hair. He stood tall, his voice echoing through the hall. Last week, he began slowly. I came to this bank, my bank, as a regular customer. And I was treated poorly. The room went silent. No one dared to breathe. He turned to the accountant. You ignored me. You pushed me aside. He turned to the manager. You told him to let me sit until I got tired. That is not leadership. That is arrogance. The manager's legs trembled. The accountant looked down, ashamed. Then Gramps Henderson's eyes fell on the young worker. But you alone saw me. You cared. You tried. You treated me with respect when others would not. Gramps Henderson walked up to him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and declared, From today, you are the new manager of this bank. The hall erupted in shock. As for you, Gramps Henderson said, pointing to the old manager, it would be harsh to throw you away, but you will no longer lead. I will place you in another position. The accountant shook with fear, her face red with shame. The other workers lowered their eyes, learning a lesson they would never forget. That day, Gramps Henderson spoke one last time. In this business, in this life, people may forget your words. People may forget your titles, but they will never forget how you made them feel. If you cannot respect the smallest customer, you do not deserve to hold the biggest office. The workers bowed their heads. The young man, now manager, stood with tears in his eyes, his heart heavy with gratitude. And from that day on, the bank of Gramps Henderson changed forever, because everyone remembered what the old man had taught them. Kindness costs nothing, but its value is everything. Thanks for watching. Please kindly like, comment your thought about this video, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.